dire situation even worse. On Wednesday, during one of his now infamous COVID-19 press conferences, a Wall Street Journal reporter asked the governor whether schools would be open on Thursday, and they are not, as Mayor Bill de Blasio announced the closure Wednesday afternoon as the city's positive COVID test rate reached 3% over a 7-day average. It is worth noting the actual transmission in the schools, surprisingly enough, has remained significantly below the city average because young kids don't really seem to, I don't know if this is crazy, but they don't really spread COVID because that is not where, and this is kind of just a broader implication of how just effed up everything is, and like we need full cooperation, full functionality from our government, which is just impossible at this point. So Cuomo shutting down the schools to really look like he does something. Schools are far from the biggest vector of COVID transmission. Still has the bars open, still has the restaurants open, still has the gyms open. That is where a lot of the stuff is going down in these social settings. It's not really at homes and families reuniting and Thanksgiving either. That is something that's also, I think, worth mentioning. But it is really those bars and restaurants and gyms. Those are what we know as the kind of biggest vectors of transmission. And those are all open. Why? Because he needs the tax revenue. And why does he need the tax revenue? Because he needs to have a functioning state. And the federal government, from Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump on down, are refusing to give him any kind of like functional aid here. But this is just an absolutely ridiculous response to a completely fair question from a reporter who's trying to figure out what the hell to go to like know what's going on with the schools here.
For over a month, it always said, if by the state's numbers...
All right, this is a little bit of a longer clip here. I think we can go to this quicker clip.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? You're now going to override. We did it already. That's the law. An orange zone and a red zone. Follow the facts.
I'm still confused.
Well, then you're confused.
I'm confused, and
then I'll tell you what, Jimmy.
Parents are still confused as well. The schools in New
they're
York
not
City
confused.
tomorrow.
You're confused.
You're confused.
No, I think
Read
parents
the
are
law.
very confused as well.
Read the law, and you won't be confused. So what are you talking about?
All right, yeah, just the sound of his voice is just blood curdling. It's just, ugh. What are you talking about? I told you, you're confused. You're stupid. We have to follow the facts. Like, he thinks he's like some sort of CNN reporter. It's like, we're doing facts here, guys. We're following the facts. And, like, everyone is just, like, gasping. It's just like, thank you, Governor Cuomo, for following the facts. You're really helping me. Thank you. Like, it is insane. So the question, again, was not well received. As it happened, the way school closures were rolled out was, as you'd expect, pretty sloppy because de Blasio and Cuomo just are the two of the most incompetent people in the planet Earth. There was much confusion, again, throughout much of Thursday because de Blasio's daily briefing about the pandemic was hours behind schedule, and adding to more of the uncertainty, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, a frequent critic of de Blasio, said earlier Thursday New York City's positivity rate was about 2.5%. De Blasio insisted that it's well known in City Hall and Albany, which is the state capital, that they develop their data in different manners, with the city backdating test results to the exact date they were administered, meaning the 3% hit threshold was hit last week. So they just can't even agree on the freaking positivity rate in the schools, so they can't even figure out whether they want to shut down the schools or not. So I can see why people may be a little bit confused. We did it already! Like, oh, what an absolute asshole. Just like, the idea of anybody questioning him, because he's just, don't you understand? I'm the governor. We did a great job. Like, he thinks he's gotten himself so much credit from the way he handled it the first time. And so much so, obviously, that he wrote a book. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but he wrote a book about how he beat the pandemic the first time in April. He's like, we'll do it now. We're working our way down. But, like, just an absolutely mind-boggling political move. It did not take long for pretty much basically every person around to point out how insane it is that indoor dining is still at a low capacity, but the New York schools are closed through Thanksgiving. Why all the confusion and the double talk? Because most charitably, in New York, the right hand really never seems to know what the left hand is doing. The mayor's office never seems to know what the governor is wanting to do, and vice versa. Why doesn't Cuomo seem to agree with the city's positivity rate? Because he's using different numbers. Why the hostility about a simple question? Because we're about to be swept up in yet another pissing match between the governor and the mayor, But unlike when warring sides just feed bitchy quotes to New York City tabloid, there was, and again, there could be real collateral damage as a result, because this happens all the time in New York about various different stupid things, but it's not about like when people's lives are actually at stake here. So, although Cuomo used his propensity for PR during the first wave of COVID-19 to kind of become America's sweetheart, he thought he was just the coolest guy for just handling it so well. We now both know that the state and city's responses were just pathetic at all fronts. We can see this by comparing the virus with Seattle's, another major city that was kind of the focal point for the virus very, very early on, as the New Yorker did at length. From this investigation, the dumb kind of way they did it is completely clear. So here is how, and I'm pretty sure we've covered this before on the show. In early March, as Dow Constantine was asking Microsoft to close its offices, this is in Seattle, and putting scientists in front of news cameras, de Blasio and New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo were giving speeches that de-emphasized the risks of the pandemic, even as the city was announcing its first official cases. De Blasio initially voiced caution, saying that no one should take the coronavirus situation lightly, but told residents to keep helping the city's economy, go on with your lives, and get out in the town despite coronavirus. He tweeted on March 2nd, one day after the first COVID-19 diagnosis in New York, a tweet that he would probably come to live in regret for, just based on how bad it turned out to be. He urged people also to go see a movie at the Lincoln Center. On the day that Seattle schools closed, de Blasio said at a press conference, if you're not sick, if you're not in the vulnerable category, you should be going about your life. Cuomo, meanwhile, told reporters that we should relax. And this was, again, amounted to a huge spread of activity, huge transmission of cases, huge amount of just spread that took place everywhere. Before the country eventually locked down, and the original spike was just absolutely tremendously super high in New York, which was insane. So, we don't even think we're going to get it as bad as it was in the other countries, he said. De Blasio and Cuomo kept bickering. On March 17th, de Blasio told residents to be prepared right now for the possibility of a shelter-in-place order. The same day, Cuomo told a reporter, there's not going to be any you must stay in your house rule. Cuomo's staff quietly told reporters that de Blasio was acting psychotic. De Blasio was close to the truth on this, as 3 days later, Cuomo announced an executive order putting the state on pause, which was essentially indistinguishable from stay-at-home orders issued by cities in Washington State, California, and elsewhere. A spokesperson for de Blasio's said that City Hall's message changed as the situation and the science changed, and said there was no dithering. A spokesperson for Cuomo said the governor communicated clearly the seriousness of the pandemic, and that the governor, again, has been laser-focused in communicating his actions in a way that doesn't scare people, kind of doing the whole Trump downplay thing. But eventually, again, here's the thing. Here's the difference between a normal person or even a slightly psychotic person and a clear, total, utter psychopath like Trump. Like, they eventually stopped it. Like, they eventually made the change. They're like, hey, this is bad. We need to make this change. But not on this side. U.S. death toll has now, again, officially climbed past 250,000, officially sliding to this L column, even by Trump's own deranged barometer. Even more than 33,000 people have died of COVID in New York State alone, and still it appears our leaders haven't learned much at all, even after dragging their feet on closures, not really even in closing things down. If you're a poor person and making a confusing mess about what's allowed and what isn't, from the New Yorker story, again, which was published in April. Today, New York City has the same social distancing policies and business closure rules as Seattle, but because New York's recommendations came later than Seattle's, and because communication was less consistent, it took longer to influence how people behaved. According to data collected by Google from cell phones, nearly a quarter of Seattleites were avoiding their workplaces by March 6th. In New York City, another week passed until the equivalent percentage did the same. So, Tom Friedman, the former CDC director, estimated that if New York had simply started implementing stay-at-home orders 10 days earlier than it did, it might have reduced COVID-19 deaths by, get this, 50 to 80%. Just 10 days. Another former New York City health commissioner said that de Blasio was, quote, just horrible. saying maybe it was unintentional, maybe it was arrogance. But if you tell people to stay home and then you go to the gym, you can't really be surprised when people go outside. 50 to 80% of COVID deaths, 50 to 80% could have been avoided had the message been unified and clear from the start. And most importantly, if everything was just shut down a few days earlier. I'm never going to shut up about this. Before you get too hot praising Cuomo's COVID response, remember that he has weighed the economic health of the state and blustered on about the national states. More and more people got the virus every single day. He didn't act with more force, and that killed people. That really killed a lot of people. When you look at those 250,000, a lot of those are Trump, especially a lot of those that came in the summer. But if you look at those first numbers coming in, you got to point the finger at Dumb and Dumber in New York. And I don't want to, I don't know if you can really specify who's dumb and who's dumber, but it really is quite a group there. I'm so glad we got these people in our government. Should have voted for Cynthia Nixon when he had the chance. Yeah. Talk about this from one Italian-American New Yorker to another. Donald Trump's top lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, held a press conference at the RNC headquarters in Washington, D.C. on Thursday to update the American people of the status of several lawsuits filed by the administration challenging the legal status of votes in literally, okay, you know what happened, folks. There was literally black sludge going down the side of it. Black fluid, literally. Running black fluid going down the side of his face. It's just, the best guess is that it's hair dye, but maybe it could be cerebral fluid. I mean, hairdressers speculate that he just rubbed some mascara on right before he went out there and it just started dripping. Like, you can see like little black specks of it on his head too. So like, it may have just been applied before he got out there and he started sweating, yelling at those reporters, and he just sweat through it. Like, if you have not seen it, you need to see it. Like, it's just that simple. Giuliani, throughout various points, was ranting about the allies of former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and current Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. I mean, the only solid ground Giuliani was on the entire afternoon was when he was discussing My Cousin Vinny. And this is what he said about My Cousin Vinny on the press conference.
Back of that room, we could do like a, did you all watch My Cousin Vinny? You know the movie? It's one of my favorite law movies because he comes from Brooklyn. And when the nice lady who said she saw, and then he says to her, how many fingers do I got up? And she says, 3. Back of that room, we...
Oh my God. Like him saying, my Cousin Vinny is his favorite movie ever while black sludge is dripping down his face. It's like, it's my favorite legal film. And he's out there like representing the president, failing catastrophically, being like, yeah, that one, My Cousin Vinny of all places. Oh my God. It is just too good to be true. Meanwhile, Vice News is reporting that right-wing YouTube channels and YouTube itself have found a way to monetize the morons who are watching this and yelling along with Giuliani. On the official Donald Trump YouTube stream, they accidentally left their audio on, and you can hear them you can see Rudy's hair dry dripping down his face.
And at once, all for Joe Biden. That's like flipping a coin.
This is the lawyer.
86,000 times, and it lands on the
See fucking Rudy's hair dye dripping down his face.
There is no reasonable explanation for the upshoot.
Yeah, so that is the people on the own Trump audio feed are watching and laughing at him, just being like, what is going on? Like, what is the atmosphere? What is the atmosphere in like the Trump campaign apparatus at this point? Like, they must be doing nothing. They're just having the time of their lives. Like, there must be like massive office parties. Like, so they don't care about masks. They'll be like just kicking their feet up. Like, what are they gonna do? Like, what is the point? Wow. So, yeah, really incredibly stupid, incredibly historic times in America. Like literally the Nero fiddling as while Rome burns period. Except instead of a fiddle, it's Rudy quoting My Cousin Vinny, while Trump probably fast forwards Bloodsport again to get to the fighting parts, to just take his mind off things and suck his thumb about how he lost the election. Just an absolutely times of record-breaking stupidity, folks.